Today's lesson is on factoring trinomials, and the trinomials will be in this form. They'll just have an x squared term as the first term, and then they're going to have a coefficient in front of the x term, and so it'll either be a plus bx or a minus bx. And again, the coefficient is in place of this b, so this could be any number there. And then for today's lesson, we're only going to have a positive c term. Now, this c term could be any number. For instance, on the first problem we see, the b term is positive 7. The c term, again, you'll see that each of these terms, the last term in each of the trinomials that we're going to factor is always a positive number. So let's take a look at how we do this. When we factor a trinomial, we don't see any common factors here, so the way it will end up factoring is as two binomials. Now, I wrote up some different parts here to each of these terms. For instance, this first term here, the x squared, is what we get when we multiply the first terms of each of these binomials. So we only have one option for numbers that multiply to make x squared, and that is an x and an x. And that's going to be the case on all of your problems for the next 3 days. Well, the last terms here, these terms right here, these are the last terms, those need to multiply to make 10. So we're trying to think of different numbers that multiply to make 10. We've got a few different numbers. We've got 1 times 10, and we also have 2 times 5. Now, what we're going to end up doing is trying one of these, but what we want is the outside terms, so the outer and inner terms, to combine to make this number here, 7x. So the outside terms are these right here. So when we multiply these numbers, and then when we multiply these numbers, the two numbers together will combine to make a 7x. So we just try different options. For instance, if you did try the 1 and the 10 first, because those two numbers do multiply to make 10, we end up here with a positive 1x. If I make this a plus sign, and if I make this a plus sign, this will end up being a 10x. And you see how those two numbers do not add to make 7. They make 11. So that would be wrong. So we've tried that. So we can go ahead and erase that work since that's not right. And we can also cross off this set of numbers because we know those aren't the right numbers. So let's try a different set. Let's try the 2 and the 5. See, those two numbers also multiply to make 10. And we check the outside terms. These are the inside terms, I guess, here first, 2x. Outside terms are 5x. And you see how those do add up to make a 7x. So it does end up working out. So when it says check your answer, we are checking our answer as we go. We know 2 times x makes 2x. X times 5 makes 5x. And we already know x times x makes the x squared. And the last terms, 2 and 5, multiply to make 10. So remember, you're using the distributive property, or the FOIL method we call it. The first term, so x times x makes the x squared. And then we have the outside, x times 5. You see here that's 5x. And then we move on to the 2. Do the inside first. 2 times x makes the 2x. And we saw how 2 times 5 makes the 10. Well, you're able to combine the 2 and the 5x to equal 7x, so it does end up working out. So your answer is x plus 2 and an x plus 5. Now, if you had it in the other order, where you had the x plus 5 first, then the x plus 2, that's the same answer. So it doesn't matter which order you do. Well, let's try another one. Again, we see an x squared as the first term. So the first thing you're going to end up doing after you draw the two sets of parentheses is putting x and x. Well, looking at this last digit sign here, it's a positive 6. So what that tells us is that the outside terms, these outer and inner terms, are going to end up adding to make a positive 5x. So we know both signs are positive. So again, when this sign is positive right here, we know that the two outside and inner terms, so O for outer, I for inner, are going to add together to make a positive 5x. And so when we're trying different numbers, we've got a couple different choices, numbers that multiply to make 6. You've got 1 and 6. You've got 2 and 3. Those are the two options. And so you just try them and see which one ends up working. Well, when we try this one here, you see the outside terms make 6x. The inside only make 1x. And those two numbers add to make 7x, which does not match the 5x. So that's wrong. So what we have to do is erase that and try something else. So we have one more option. Let's see if that one works. Well, we'll go ahead and cross off this one since we know it didn't work, the 1 and the 6. Let's try the 2 and the 3. So we have 2 times 3 also makes 6. We know x and x make x squared. So we're just checking the inside terms, which make 2x. Outside are 3x, and those two numbers do add to make 5x. So it does work. So we got our answer, x plus 2 and an x plus 3. Now let's try another set. We've got another x squared, and we've got positive 7x, positive 12. So again, this last term right here, when that's positive, and all the problems are going to be positive today. We know the outside and inside terms are adding together, O for outer, I for inner, and they add to make a positive 7x. So if they add to make a positive, that tells us that the two signs inside the binomials are going to both be plus. So we have x and a plus, x and a plus. Those are the first things we can put in there. Well, what else can we put in there? Well, we can figure out the different numbers that make 12. We've got a few different options. We've got 3 and 4. We've got 2 and 6. We also have 1 and 12. So we just have to try them all and see which one ends up working. Now, as we do this, we have 3 times 4 makes 12. And notice that the x times 4 makes 4x. The inside terms here, 3 and x, make 3x. And what do those add to make? 7x. So sometimes when I'm doing these problems, I try to think ahead of it rather than just putting the numbers in here. I have to think ahead. What are those two numbers going to add to make? Does it make the 7? It'll make the problem go a little quicker for you if you use that method. So x plus 3 and x plus 4 are the two factors. Again, if you had it in the other order, that would be the same answer. If you ended up trying out the 2 and the 6, see those two numbers will add to make 8, so that wouldn't be right. 1 and 12, they add to make 13, so that'd be wrong as well. So there's only one answer when you do these. Well, the next three problems are a little different. Let's see why. We still have a positive last term, and we're going to see that every time. Outer and inners are going to add together, but this time they make a negative 13x. So in order to add to make a negative, that tells us that the outside and inside terms are both negative. So instead of drawing the two sets of parentheses and putting an x and a plus sign, this time we're going to do an x and a minus. It's an x and a minus. So because, again, that middle term is negative. So we've got lots of different numbers that make 36, so you just got to think of all of them. Now, as you do it, you'll notice that when you try numbers that are really close together, like 6 times 6, those are going to add together to make smaller numbers. See, that adds together to make 12. Here we have 4 and 9, so as we spread the numbers apart, they start to get bigger as you add them together. We also have 3 and 12. You also have 2 and 18. And the last set would be 1 and 36. So you got all these different numbers to try. So you just have to try them, and you might have already seen the answer before I even finished this problem. So let's see if you did. See, 6 times 6 makes 36, so that works. X times x makes x squared. But you always need to check your outside and inside terms to see if they add to make that middle term. You see, when I add those two numbers together, I end up getting a negative 12x. Not quite big enough. Well, we've tried that number. We get to go ahead and erase those different answers we got there and try something else. So again, a lot of trial and error on these problems, but you might be able to work ahead and think through the problem a little bit further than just doing each of the steps here and be able to come up with that answer. Let's see what happens here. 4 and 9, we know those make 36. The two negatives make a positive, so it does match. The inner terms make a negative 4x. Outside make a negative 9x. Hey, look, those numbers make a negative 13x. It works. We've got our answer. So there it is, x minus 4 and an x minus 9. Well, let's check out another one here. Again, same scenario. We have a positive last term here, so that tells us that the outer terms and inner terms are adding together. But again, they're going to make a negative number, negative 10x. So we have two negative signs there. So we'll go ahead and draw our two sets of parentheses. And we've got an x and a minus, an x and a minus. And we go ahead and try some different numbers that make 16. So again, you're thinking of numbers, you might start with 4 and 4, because those two numbers do multiply to make 16. But we also have 2 and 8. You also have 1 and 16. So you just come up with all the different possibilities and then just try them. And again, you might be able to look at the different possibilities and then just come up with the answer just by looking at them. You might get to be that fast. Let's see if I got it the first time. Negative 4x and a negative 4x is what I get. Well, those two numbers don't quite make the 10. See, that only makes negative 8x. So notice that when the numbers are really close together, they're going to add to make a smaller number. So if I want to get a bigger number, what I need to do is I need to try numbers that are further apart. That's what I'm going to end up doing on the next set of numbers here. So let's see here. We know that 4 and the 4 do not work, so we now try the 2 and the 8. So put the 2 and the 8 here. Inside terms make a negative 2x. Outside terms make a negative 8x. And those numbers do add to make negative 10x. It works. So we got it on the second try. So we go ahead and write that down in our answer box. X minus 2 and an x minus 8. Well, let's take a look at the next one here. Here we have another instance where we have a positive last term. So in the positive last term, we know that the outer and inners are adding together, but we look at the middle term, it adds to make a negative 11x. It tells us that both outside and inside are negative. So what we can do is write an x and a minus sign, an x and a minus sign. And we can go ahead and try some different options, some numbers that multiply to make 24. Now we got lots of options here. We got 4 and 6, you've got a 3 and an 8, you've got a 2 and a 12, and a 1 and a 24. So again, the closer the numbers are, the closer or the smaller the number will be. The further apart they are, the further apart they'll be. And so let's go ahead, or the bigger number they'll be, I should say. So let's try that 4 and 6. We know those two numbers multiply to make 24. We know x and x multiply to make x squared. But you got to check those outside-inside terms to see if they work. Negative 4x, negative 6x. So those only make a negative 10x. Not quite enough. Well, we know that's wrong, so we can cross it off, and we can erase that possibility. And try another option. Well, our next option is going to be the 3 and the 8. So let's put those numbers in there, 3 and 8. So we got a negative 3x and a negative 8x. Look, we got it on the second try. It makes a negative 11x. Well, there's our answer, x minus 3 and an x minus 8. Well, that's factoring trinomials in the form of x squared plus or minus bx plus c. Good luck on tonight's work.